Welcome to the latest episode of How Shit Gets Made, a glimpse into the secret world that influences how products, services, and brands come into our lives. So, hello everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of How Shit Gets Made. This is a glimpse into the secret world that influences how products, services, and brands come into our lives. And today I have two guests that I'm really excited to talk to for this podcast because they are lovely and amazing people and really fun to have conversations with. And so my first guest is Pati. So Pati, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Nikki. So I'm Pati Dominguez, or Pati, and I am an insights analyst at Diageo, looking into their e-commerce world. And I've been in the industry for 8 years now, so not so new, but still loads and loads to learn.
Okay, excellent. And with Pati is her brave husband, who is willing to be on the other side of this inquisition from us. So Santi, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, Nikki. So my name is Santi Dominguez, and I'm an account-based marketing manager at Autodesk, an American software company. And I've been working in marketing, I think, for 10 years now, B2B the whole way through, and specialized in account-based marketing for the last 3 to 4 years. I'm very excited to be here.
Excellent. Well, I'm so excited to have you both. As we were saying before we pressed the record button, the last time we actually hung out was in Scotland when the world was a different place. And we were actually there because Pati and I were attending a research conference for the market research industry. And so just so that you two know, actually, some of the people that listen to this podcast don't think about market research. They are either just consumers, so they are participating or don't really know anything about our world. And some people who listen are actually user researchers. So they're listening to see how much of what we talk about is similar or different. And I imagine, Santi, someone working in startups and working with digital products and software companies, you're probably also a little bit aware of this other thing called user research, which is a bit different than market research. But yeah, so I guess I would love to tell the listeners a little bit about your story. So you have quite an interesting story. I won't ask you personal questions about how you found each other, although it's really great. So if you find Pati in real life, ask her the question about her and Santi, but also just kind of how your professional worlds overlap. So Santi, maybe we can start with you because you were saying before that you actually worked with Lucy, who was a previous podcast guest for us.
Oh, fantastic.
Nice.
Yeah, so maybe you can tell us a little bit how did you discover this world of research that we're in?
Yeah, so I worked with Lucy for I think almost 4 years, and it was a great experience. I learned so much from her and the team, and that was officially my first, let's say, deep dive into the research world. So I didn't know. I was very green when I started, and she brought me up to speed on everything that it means to be a qualitative, quantitative research. How does it work? How you guys make a living of being nosy and asking around questions, and how can that be translated into marketing? So to support brands, specifically market research brands, communicate the propositioning and their value and the value added they bring to the table to end customers. And funnily enough, I think Pati and I met when I was still...
Yeah, you were still with Lucy.
Yeah, I was still
and he was bragging that he had an MRS certification. To me. I don't have one.
Okay, cool. Then who's a researcher here?
Which by the way, for listeners, MRS is the Market Research Society, in case there are some who don't know. So
yeah, and the funny thing is...
Wait, Nikki, do you have one?
I don't.
Exactly. So who's a researcher here in this call, yeah?
It's so funny because obviously my first company where I worked, Skem, was international. I started in Holland before coming to London, and Santiago was all over the people in the industry here. He was dropping names and telling me all these things. I was I don't know who you're talking about because I just started as well as him, and I was who's this guy? Why is he telling me all these things? But yeah, he's more of a researcher in that sense then.
So I love the fact that you said that you learned from Lucy about how we get paid basically to be nosy. And so now your wife is like professional nosy person.
Yeah.
So
No disclosure. That was not
unprofessional too.
Lucy's. That was not Lucy's definition.
okay, just to get Lucy off the hook. This is not how
Yeah, to get
she
Lucy off the hook.
So, and then tell me a bit more about that. Like, what do you think, what do you think about our nosiness and its value and what do we do with it?
I think it's fun. Well, I think I cheated because I know quite a bit now. Like if it were a little bit kind of like coming, someone else not knowing coming in, they might have a different opinion. But thinking of back in the day when I first started, it was quite like it was very interesting because it's kind of like decoding the human brain and decoding why we make decisions and, what inspires us to like, either go voting one candidate or another candidate. And there's so many applications, but at the same time, it's like, so we're basically kind of like finding a way to convince people to do something that, with great power comes great responsibility kind of thing. But it was always funny to think, you sit in a room and talk to people and then you're like, oh yeah, they're going to buy this product for this reason. It's like, how do you know that? It's kind of like, how do you do it? It's like 50 people. You have like 1 million consumers.
The market, Santi, that's obvious.
Yeah, but
So, Patti, maybe you could tell us, I know obviously you can't divulge too much information about clients or specific findings or anything, but maybe there's kind of an example project that you worked on at some point in your career, something you thought was really fun or really interesting. And maybe, I don't know, you were working on it while you and Santi were together. And it would be great to just kind of hear something fun that you influenced.
Yeah. I do mostly quantitative research, but I'm always really, really curious about qual because it's where you get to talk to people and you get to know the why much quicker as well, because you can like dig into it and you see the emotions of people are talking to you. And like this one project that I had to go to people's houses and see how they used this one gadget that they had in their kitchen. And it's so interesting because it happens that every time I do a project for a brand, I end up wanting to buy the brand. So I'm like, I'm really lucky that I don't do like luxury research because that'll be a problem. So obviously I came home, I was like, we need to buy this gadget. Like, it's amazing. So
that's called self-market research.
Yeah, I have a theory that all these brands like hire us as agencies, to just buy their product because it happens to me. But in any case, it was really interesting to see how this one product, right, it's a machine basically becomes part of their lives and how they like integrate it to it and then how like they interact with them. So to me, that's always so fascinating because at least for me, for consumer research is something that I can really empathize because obviously I'm a consumer myself. So that has been one of the funnest things, like going to people's houses. And I'm always surprised. It's very naive of me, but I'm always surprised how people are so willing to talk to you about things like be it toilet paper or like drinks or this machine. So to me, that's fascinating and I love it.
Yeah. So besides being a little concerned about your wife's urge to buy new things, Santi, when she was working on a product like this, where she was going into people's houses, obviously, as you said, you already kind of knew a bit about the industry and how this worked. But when you're sort of observing a person who's going into houses and coming back and being like, I just learned all this stuff. What is it like for you kind of watching her go through this?
I guess it's strange because you come back and like, she's been in someone else's house, just like.
And I'm all fired up. I'm like, this happened and this happened and this happened.
I went to this house in Birmingham or whatever, and in this neighborhood with this family and these people, and I'm like, what are you doing with people's houses? Like, stop being so nosy. Let people have a life. Like, come on,
but
mate.
It's true that they love sharing. They really love letting you in. Obviously, you have to find the right people because for sure there are some who are not interested. But I have the same, as you know, Patti. I do focus on the qualitative side. So this has been like my whole career is like going into people's houses, and I could literally write a book on some of the stories that I have had from.
I once went to like someone's house and it was about like a product, and then I knew like half of their life afterwards. It's like that also is really interesting. It's just
Yeah. I mean, I had a project, it was also in the UK. I had a project once where I was helping a big like social network company trying to evaluate whether or not the app on mobile phones was user-friendly for people with various different types of disabilities. So physical disabilities and particularly visual impairments. And I went to people's homes who were visually impaired, and I sat next to them and I said, "Show me how you use this app." And I tell everyone, the project changed my life. I mean, I was talking to people that I would never have any reason to talk to prior. And then they were showing me, I was coming in and there was a woman, she had her 2 guide dogs and she was going about her business. She was completely blind. And she was just like, "Oh, would you like some tea?" and pouring me. And I was like, just completely blown away by how, she had adapted to her life. And she's just, "Oh yeah, this is how I do the thing." And I just learned so much myself as a person. And I think it really changed me. So I can only imagine what it's like for our clients who are making really big decisions. Like I was just handing them information, but they actually get to make decisions off of this kind of information.
But I also think that sometimes clients are, obviously much further away from their consumers as well. So we are in a really interesting position where you talk directly to them, and I think clients really appreciate when they get to be as well so close, because on the day-to-day you're just making decisions and talking to others, but the actual people that use it, so that's really powerful. And I think that's like one of the big things of our job, right? Like being really empathetic as to who is really using it and who's the consumer, because sometimes the people that actually run the brands are really not that consumer, and it's really important to bridge that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a good segue into pointing a question at you, Santi, because again, when we were kind of warming up for this discussion, you were saying that, your company kind of uses this research. You kind of make some decisions based off of things. So maybe you can tell me a bit about it, because you were saying you generate insights, you pull research, but like what else happens at your company? Do they use this kind of information to make decisions?
I'm sure they do. I'm not sure if there's an actual team.
Okay.
Well, it's a 40-year-old software company. Of course.
How many people are working there?
Oh, no idea.
Hundreds of thousands?
No. Maybe? I don't know.
But yeah,
it's pretty big. It's pretty big. It's pretty big.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you personally don't really interact with like research findings, or do you?
No. Well, I think it might be different because we're a B2B business. We don't have specifically consumers, so we have customers. So we deal with companies and businesses and users. Yeah. But directly, we don't have. It's not you can buy the product. It's not a product you can buy every day.
Mm-hmm. But regardless, let me stop you right there, because you know how people think like, oh, it's only consumer research. B2B research is also really big.
It's huge.
And in the end, it's very similar to consumer research because we're dealing with humans.
If you think about it, B2B is what actually drives the economy, because consumer is, B2B has a far more investment and more money than consumer.
Tell me more.
How much more?
In my humble opinion.
No, but
in my unfounded, without research opinion.
But see, he says, we don't do a lot of research, but actually B2B research is really important. I've done a little bit of it, but obviously it does feel, even to me, like a bit like, separated, and in terms of like, well, who is talking to business or business owners, etc. But it is an important part of research.
Yeah, it's funny because like I do research every once in a while, and my kind of research is probably far more professional and structured than yours, because I need to talk to a customer.
Far more professional.
Whoa. Far less professional.
Okay. I see. Yes. Now you can continue.
But it's more of a, I talk to one customer about one experience with my team, but I don't talk to hundreds of them about their experience with our software or why they buy our software versus buying the competitors but that's,
but it's also not the nature of your job, because your type of marketing you do is very specific, and it's not that you go to many people, you go to like a few, right?
It's because I need to understand the customer, and to understand the customer, you need to do research. Not like a qualitative or quantitative, like full deployed situation, but more like
you still need the information. To get
you read a few reports, and you
so see, that's research as well.
It's funny because the last couple that I had on also was married couple, and the guy was working in sales, so not account-based marketing, but quite, adjacent. And he was saying the same, that like, okay, my company sometimes uses research, and I'm also a bit doing research, but it's my own self having like maybe a slightly more in-depth conversation with a potential customer or potential buyer than usual. And then I'm trying to extrapolate like everything that I learned from that long conversation into something else. So, I mean, I think it's really interesting the different ways that research gets used or not. So, I mean, maybe one of the other things that I think would be interesting to hear from you, Santi, is like, have you ever, in witnessing Pati's work, has there ever been a project or a time when you've been like, what is this? What is she doing? I don't understand this. Or on the contrary, maybe something where you were like, this is an amazing project she's working on. It's super cool.
Oh, I think it will be difficult without like revealing too much information, but I can tell when Pat is really excited about a project or not. And I think she was doing some work for a financial company. About financial planning. Was it like, I can't say the name, but, financial planning and the use of certain financial
tools,
things available to the customer. And she was really excited because it was kind of like, you kind of like see what people are kind of like, how people see their finances, how they plan. And then you because you have a perception, you might say, like I can say, B2B is more important and drive more money than B2C. But then I'm saying this in a very unfounded way. Pati was saying like, I had this perception of this, but then actually the perception of the data is saying this. So wow, it's really incredible to, and then you do a little bit of comparison. Where do we sit in this scale? And then you say, well, actually we're not that bad. And then because you normally tend to think you're doing worse than other people, and then maybe
I remember it was a huge segmentation. So it was like, where do we sit in this segmentation? Because again, we are consumers, right? And it's so cool.
So this is a great question, and I want to ask you, because remembering that not everyone who listens to this podcast is a researcher. So can you, Pati, explain to us what is a segmentation?
You put me on the spot. So basically, a segmentation is a way to break down a market or a group of people in different groups that have traits that are similar. There are different ways of doing it. So obviously you could break down in like demographics. So, people from 18 to 24, that's not probably the best segmentation, but usually there's also attitudinal traits or motivational traits. So why, for example, did you consume this drink? Because I wanted to energize myself, for example. So that's kind of like that part you fit there as a segmentation. So it's a way of understanding a big group of people in like smaller groups
so professional.
that help make sense of a big group. And in this case, for example, it could be a country or women, for example, or so that's, I hope that made sense for the listeners.
Definitely. And I think actually in the past interview that I did just before this one, which, as I said, was also a married couple, they touched a little bit upon a segmentation. And I was actually telling my partner, Paul, about it this morning in preparation for this. I was saying, so my friend Nina was talking about on her first date with her now husband, she was able to tell which laundry detergent he was using because of a segmentation she had done. Not from smell. I was immediately like, you smelled the clothes. And she was like, no, we did a segmentation. And he was in this age bracket and had this type of attitude, and so therefore he was using this laundry detergent. And so what I thought was really funny was and it turned into a party trick. She was able to do it to other
lavender.
people.
You do Mr. Muscle or Ace? I actually don't know the laundry brand. So
Mr. Muscle.
Well, anyway, it was in Germany. And it was in Germany anyway, so it's a different range. But Paul was saying to me, isn't it crappy sometimes when you find out that you fit perfectly into a segmentation because you thought like, oh no, I'm unique, I'm very different. You cannot categorize me.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same equivalent that people ask you your like, I don't know, I see like a Greek mythology. You cannot escape your fate. Whatever happens, you're gonna end up with a tragedy. As far as you try to escape from a segmentation or a bot, you're gonna end up in another bot.
Yeah, but that's what also an interesting point, because sometimes I find myself in like, well, when we could meet or link in Zoom meetings, etc., talking about the consumer, right? Like these people do that, and it's just like, and at points I like stop myself and it's like, I'm talking about humans here. Like it feels like sometimes like really separated from us, but in the end is just us. So that's something as well. Sometimes in our trade that I do feel like I separate myself too much from the consumer, and they do that, and then it's just like, no, you're talking about people that are like similar to you.
But okay, so I have a question for the room then. So, but have you never been on a project and you go like, "Ooh, this is me. Like, ooh, this person is whatever age bracket. They drink this kind of product, blah blah," and you go like, "Ooh, I'm marketing this to myself." And then you think like, you know what? I can actually influence what kind of product decisions these are going to make. So I really always fancy having an extra feature on this product. So I'm just going to say the data. I'm just going to say the data showing this. And then you can be like, yeah. A few months down the road, you can be like,
extra chocolate.
Yeah.
That's what we all wanted.
No, that wouldn't be very ethical to do. It's whatever it does.
Well, to answer your question, though, I think, and both of what you're saying, I think one thing that I've always observed is being on the qualitative side, as Patti was saying, I've always find that my colleagues who are more on the quantitative side doing the surveys and stuff, they do have this like distance, whereas the qualis don't. I have the opposite. I don't have this problem, Santi, where I see like, yes, it's 37. That's me. Oh, I'm just kidding. I'm 38 now. And this and this and this. And that's me. I don't do that. What happens is I'm like interviewing, I don't know, a black man who has a physical disability. And by the end, I'm like, he and I are the same person, because you empathize so much with them that you really have to like put yourself in their shoes completely in order to communicate what they're experiencing back. So I don't have this issue of like, this is being marketed to me. I feel like I am everyone. I feel like my own behavior changes after I talk to people in different categories.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, it's the same as me wanting to buy brands. Say, now they use it this way.
But Nikki's saying she changes as a person. You change your financial situation. It's a very different. Like you don't come home and say, I want to be this. No, you say, I want to buy this. It's a different conversation.
No, but actually those things are related, because maybe she, for example, observes this sort of like aspirational life. There's this person living in this house. It's a beautiful house. They have a nice family. These are all things I want. And the centerpiece of that life is this kitchen machine. So I bet if I had this kitchen machine, I would feel like my life was also this kind of aspirational way. We have, one of the things I love is that consumers, people in general, we don't really understand how we interact with products, brands, or services. We don't know. We just think like, I have this mug, but actually this mug changes my relationship with tea. Because every time I'm drinking out of this mug, people are going, I love your mug. It's so huge. How much tea do you drink? And then I'm like, I'm a tea connoisseur. I drink more tea now, not just because the mug can hold more, but because it has conveyed to everyone this image of me.
And I'm sure when you hold it, you feel like comforted as well, because it's you're going to have a great tea.
And you have some nice whales on it.
Yeah, I'm glad that you see whales, because sometimes people are like, I like your mustache mug. And I'm like, this is...
Or like
I did think it was a mustache.
They look
first.
like chicken thighs as well.
Yes, I'm a vegetarian, Patti. I thought you knew this by now. We don't have chicken legs. This is not a drumstick mug. It is a whale mug.
Drumsticks.
But anyway, it's true that could happen. I think that I'm sure somewhere somebody was like one time, I don't know, trying to influence a product or service in their own direction. But actually, I think it's very hard to do. It's very hard to do that because... you would have to make up a lot of data, I think.
a lot of percentages. And
Excel, just kind of like copy paste all the way through.
No, SPSS will find you and say, like, this doesn't make any sense that you're adding all this outlier, in the data cleaning. It would just get chucked out, I think. But yeah. Well, anyway, so the other thing that I think would be interesting to hear from you both about is, do you ever, Patti, maybe observe something that Santi has worked on or is doing and you think, why don't you do some research? Or how come you don't have any research influencing this stuff that you're doing?
Yeah,
because we know everything.
Yeah,
we know everything.
Everything needs research. Like, why do you? So the way I understand the job that Santi does is that he goes the way that your marketing is to go to not go mass in terms of like reaching to people, but a few specific, right? Like they will go to just a few that they know is going to be very, very effective. So I always think, like, have you talked to them? Like, do you know what they want? Like, it's just like, how can you know, like, are you hiring people to do your research, like to understand the customer? Because obviously they have industries, right? So they have similarities, etc. So I always think of that. And obviously now that we're working at home, we're like literally working next to each other. So I hear like, yeah, the research that the agency did. I was like, what research?
Who was the agency?
Excuse me. Yeah, but then he's like, no, it's just this research or something. And it's just kind of like, for him, it's more like general or higher level. But I do think there's like a lot of, and not only like his department, but a lot of departments in companies could really benefit from different type of research to understand like what's going on. So yeah, have you thought of like, oh, I'm going to do some research because I know it's great?
Yeah, I do. I'm actually doing some research for a project now, but it's not the same kind of research that you're doing. It could be more academic, so to speak. It's not talking directly to customers because that will take a lot of money and a lot of time.
Yeah, and a lot of like obviously these contacts that you don't have a lot of time. I'm trying to
sell to them effectively. So I want to come to them with something that
not ask them questions, but come to them with answers.
With a solution to their challenges and well, obviously opportunities for us. But yeah, and I think at work, there's a lot of teams looking into, for example, industry challenges and industry outcomes and customer profiles, personas, and all this is based on research. I don't think we should have I assume, we're a software company, so I assume there's a UX team somewhere, and there's another team doing the research for the UX. But in general, my side of the business is more about the industry level and what's happening with the industry, how do we translate that into opportunities.
And I guess like the research as well is more product marketing led or product like or maybe not in this role.
It's more solution. It's more solution oriented, because if you think of a customer saying, okay, well, I want to produce X product faster, well, what are the constraints and how Autodesk can help produce that product faster, or maybe it's not even producing product faster, maybe something else you need to do, and then
like sustainability, like more sustainable.
Which is basically research at the end of the day, but it's not in the traditional sense of consumer market research. It's like yours that is more like drinks orientated.
So maybe I'm not allowed to ask this, and if not, just say like move on, can't talk about it. But who are you marketing to at your company, Santi? Like obviously it's B2B, but so like what kinds of buyers are you trying to market to?
Well, I think what I can share is that I work in the design and manufacturing industry. Okay. So we're talking to decision makers in the design and manufacturing industry.
Let's say
Manufacturers.
Decision makers at factories. Okay, at manufacturers. Okay, so obviously this means that there would be not a very huge sample size, and also a very difficult to reach audience, let's say.
Yes.
So doing a quantitative survey where you need to have a lot of sample in order to run numbers would be basically impossible. But doing qualitative research to understand like what are their struggles that they're facing, what are their pain points, what are their needs, in order to tell you how you should be marketing, keywords you should be using in your marketing campaigns, etc. This could be something that is useful, or
I think
What are your
definitely.
thoughts?
I think definitely, and we have certain programs in place that help us understand these kind of things. But I feel that like we're a big team and across several regions. So doing this for each region will be a big time constraint and
Cost prohibitive.
cost prohibitive situation. So as everything in business, you have to like make do what you've got. So we have certain activities that help us understand the customer. We have team members that focus pretty much on talking to the customer on a regular basis. So you can tap into their brains, you can tap into the other knowledge the teams are sharing, and then you start piecing together from different sources, kind of like you try to draw a picture. And in some occasions, you might get some external help to where you give all the information and you say, well, help me make a story out of this. But I think in general, it's like having like the traditional sense of having a qualitative or a quantitative project. I'm going to go on a leap and say, usually we don't, my role don't do it. I don't know the rest of the business.
So do you think that the time that you spent, for example, working with Lucy and learning about our industry, do you think that has influenced the way you think about account-based marketing and the way that you have done your job, the jobs since then?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's really funny because the way I see it is I work with Lucy for a long time, and then I learned a lot about the industry, and then I moved on to work in tech, and then I moved on to ABM, and then when you land on ABM, ABM at the core is you have to understand the consumer, you have to understand the customer, you have to understand what's happening in the industry. So knowing the structure and the in and outs of research, kind of like helps you become a better ABMer. And it was really funny because when I started working in ABM, it was kind of, I understand this, I understand that, I've done this already. So it was really, really helpful. Which is really funny because, you never know where life will take you.
You never thought that starting at like Kinas Masters was going to help you 10 years down the line.
Yeah, down the line. I'm in a massive American software company. It's like, who thought about it? But it's really funny,
that's life.
Yeah.
C'est la vie.
Yeah.
No, I think that's really cool. And also because I'm wondering as well, people are always asking, you know how it is, Pati, also because you and I are working together on the Young SMR Society initiative. So we're always trying to think about how can we engage with younger folks. And it's really great hearing kind of your experience, Santi, because one of the things I think I don't think about very often, we always joke in our industry that nobody sets out to become a market researcher. No one tries to be a market researcher. It's all an accident. So the two things I think are funny is that it's not true on the user research side. They do want to become user researchers. Specifically, they take college courses to do this. But then the other thing I think when thinking about something like the Young SMR Society thing is, even if they don't stay in research for their entire career, they learn skills that can help them with any other kind of thing. And I think we forget this sometimes, like how valuable this knowledge is that we learn.
It is true.
Yeah, but I also think like sometimes, research, what I've witnessed, because I also worked for a fintech company for a while and had experience with different corporations, global corporations, and you notice that a lot of people do research, but it's not a traditional sense of research, and maybe something that sometimes I see with Pati say like, well, I know that at a previous company there was one team pretty much analyzing all the data of the transactions and coming up with solutions based on machine learning, AI, all this stuff, and if you decompose that enough, that's a market researcher. You're understanding the customer.
Definitely. Yeah.
And I feel there's like people still think market research and research is separate from all those insights. And in some occasions you're thinking, because someone at a company focuses all their time understanding an industry, which means talking to customers, doing reading reports.
Or just analyzing sales, for example.
That is not research. And it's like, in my opinion, that's all research.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think there's I've said it in my podcast as well, like there's a reticence of the like traditional market research to like accept or adapt new ways of finding insights. So like, you have the UX, CXs, or even just analytics. And it doesn't have to be like AI, machine learning, like all that way, but literally analytics of like, okay, how do we analyze this HR data or like these sales or these transactions to get to actionable insights? This is basically what we do in the traditional sense. So I do think that there's a little bit of a kind of, we're stuck in that, and like, how do we accept everyone and like make it like a bigger industry? And I think that's the key to bringing younger people in as well, because there's a lot of evolution, and there is a room for like traditional research, but there's also a lot going on that people are studying in universities, etc. So how do we open up and actually make it that it's not only market research and we accept everyone
Business
else?
Intelligence.
Yeah, it's just like it's basically insights creation, which is every company needs it. Every department needs insights. Santi needs insights.
We know everything.
Well, no. But even marketing needs insights. So how do we as an industry open up to that and then evolve as well?
Yeah. So this actually raises a really great question for me, which is kind of the point of why we started doing this podcast in a slightly different format, which is the people who participate in research who don't know that all of this work is happening. I mean, there are people who don't know that when they receive a newsletter, actually somebody did a survey in order to find out exactly which topics are interesting before they were sent that newsletter.
Of it to be like
exactly. They don't know that their favorite app was tested 500 times by some users before, the latest update came out with all these new features. So this raises to me what you're saying about like, how can we be more open? In my opinion, part of being more open and getting a sort of collaboration and awareness of all of the different types of research is also having to do with, having an open conversation with just regular people who aren't doing research. Why is our world a secret? Why does nobody know what we do?
And also sometimes, why do we feel we are like the keepers or of something so like important? It's like, of course what we do is important. It's not like we're operating on brains or anything, but it's important. But it's like, why don't we just like, like others like can know about it and it will be better as well.
Yeah. So why do either of you have any thought or opinion? Like, why do you think our industry is so like the regular average everyday person doesn't even know that all of this research is happening?
That's a good question.
This is interesting to me as like, there is a research person. Why do you think it happens? And then there is a non-research person, Santi. Why do you think it happens?
Go on.
I think there's a lack of knowledge. Like, I might be spilling the beans here, but people have no idea how much investment goes into understanding you
as a consumer.
As a consumer.
Like the things
but
that
why?
we
well, I don't know, like, because people don't want to, like, there's a big issue around privacy at the moment. Yeah, so that's a hot topic. A lot of people are starting to understand why a cookie tracker on a computer is. Why it's important that you understand when you accept cookies that you are going to be targeted. What happens when your phone is listening to you, like,
or what happens when you use an app that is free. Like,
exactly.
Obviously, what are you giving them back as well?
Exactly. So there's no such thing as a free meal. Everyone downloads Instagram. But like, the app is free, so what are you exchanging? Sorry, mate, the guy that's listening to this, sorry, it's not directed at you.
Names will not be mentioned, but we all know who we're talking about.
But there's not such thing as a free meal, so people are starting to understand that there's an exchange, and the most valuable thing that a consumer has is their knowledge. So I think people don't understand that. So
I think maybe like the fact that, like, for example, the internet and technology have closed that gap, right? Like before, like the consumer is now more empowered than ever. Like we basically have all the world information at like tip of our hands in terms of Google and finding stuff. And before, like obviously 60s, 70s, we couldn't do that. So I think that has really helped people understand like what really goes on. So I think before maybe there was that gap, right? Like this kind of like wall, like companies and then consumers. And of course there was a lot of research going on, but we just didn't know. Yeah.
But do you think it's because there's a fear that people might think that you're the bad guys?
Well, yeah,
that you're trying to manipulate the consumer. Because, if Nikki was using a really good example before, there's this app, that is for disabled people, visually impaired. How can you improve it and make it better for a wider pool of people if you don't understand in your current user? So the next upgrade that you do is more useful for everyone else. And that's a very genuine, noble usage. But some people might say, well, but you're actually also thinking of ways to make me...
You're just trying to get more users.
Yeah,
that chocolate more appealing at the shop.
Yeah, so, but I guess that's also a bit of like, and maybe I'm being contentious here, but it's just like being naive. Like when people say, like, when all these things around like privacy and people being really... oh, I can't believe they're using my data. It's like, well, you are using an app for free. So how do business work, right? Like business work, they have to make money. How do they do it with your data? I'm not saying that it's ethical or not. That's another question. But it's just like also people now are understanding that more because we've heard, fantastic, I have this app like Facebook. I can use it all the time. But obviously you are giving them something in return. So I think now there's more of an understanding of that. Yeah. And I think it comes to transparency because if you're telling someone like a consumer, like I'm gonna talk to like the like hearing impaired or visually impaired to talk to improve the app, that's really clear like why you're talking to them. But then if there's like something kind of not really clear as to why you are talking to them and doing things, I think that's when the trust is broken and when all of these things that are happening now in terms of privacy, etc., are like really break up and become like really public. And I do think that the transparency now is also very key with this same point, like you can find information really quickly.
Yeah, and companies are taking steps towards that direction, exactly. Which is good.
Yeah.
But I think maybe going back to your original question, Nikki, I think is more in my humble opinion, I think is a little bit of there's a lack of understanding from my end outside the industry. How does it work? Like what kind of value does it bring? And I think it goes down to the brands communicating how being part of this process actually is for the better, greater good.
And also, I don't know, that this is coming back, and this is something that I've been chatting to other people. It's like when you're in high school or like little, you're like, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, or like marketing, like you kind of understand sales, but like market research is not really known. And when you say market research, some people are like, oh, so you're just calling people, right? Like, or like you're like filling up like a survey, and obviously that's evolved. So is it like, are we not, like as an industry, are we not going to this like career type of fairs or like explaining what it is? Because I don't know how many other, I'm sure other positions like that are not really well known, but we also, I don't think, do a good job at like being there kind of in the pre-university time, so people really understand what they can do with their profession.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. I always I always struggle with explaining to people what I do for a living because they don't get it. First of all, whenever I say market research, they say, so marketing, you mean?
Yeah.
No, I don't do marketing. No, I do market research. So surveys. No, I don't do surveys. So now I'm confused. So what do you do exactly? And I say, I interview people, and I have a little speech that I say, I interview consumers about their products that they use and their preferences and their habits. And I talk to them about, what they do in their daily lives and their preferences. And then I use that information to help brands improve their products and services.
So
and then people go, so you get paid to talk to people. And I said, yes, but it's so much more than that.
Yeah. I usually say I help companies or brands to understand their consumer better. Like that's kind of like my really short answer. Because then people are like, what, surveys? Like, do you just go door to door? Or like, do you call? And it's like, no. But it's I do think also there's that like, I don't know, 70s, 60s view of like people doing surveys like that. And obviously that's changed much more, like much in the, like doing many different things now.
Yeah, I know at least in America, the idea of market research is still really heavily associated with receiving phone calls at home on your landline that you don't want to receive, like at 8 o'clock at night during dinner time or in the evening. And then they're going, oh, there's all these telesales people. And they say telesales, but they actually mean researchers because it's usually surveys. And so now everyone just has this like, I don't answer, I don't want anything to do with it. Whereas even, you know, you take a flight on, I don't know, British Air, and then immediately after you get an email saying, oh, your flight was just finished. Can you please click this survey to tell us how we did? And responding to that can be really, really helpful and can literally change the service and the quality of your interaction with the brand. But people are like, oh, survey, so horrible.
I do try to, I try to do them just to see like the UX of it and see what I can learn from it.
Same.
And then also to be like, I know this is important to them. But I just remember, I don't know if you remember when we bought our car, like, or the sales guy was like, can you please fill in this survey? And it's an NPS survey, so a Net Promoter Score survey. So it's basically when they ask you, would you recommend this to friends and families on a scale from 0 to 10? And he was like, but can you please, if you really like my service, do either 9 or 10? Because if we do 8, it doesn't work. And obviously it's the way NPS is calculated that I was like, oh, I know, Alex, it's okay. We can do it.
You said his name.
Oh, sorry. But anyway, his name is not Alex. But I thought it was really funny because, I understand what he means. And it's just like, oh, it's just the way this is calculated that they're forced like several ways because this can affect his bonus or like, you know, his performance. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we're actually at the end of our time. Already, it went so quickly. So yeah, thank you both for talking to me about this. I love this. I love this like format and hearing from two different sides of what it's like to be either a part of research or an onlooker, an observer to research. So I appreciate you both for being here. And also, Pati, I just wanted to, can you give the listeners the name of your podcast? Because Pati also has a podcast. So if anyone's listening and wants to learn more about research and hear from other researchers specifically on what they're working on, Pati, maybe we can point them to you.
Of course. So my podcast is called In the Name of Insights, and you can find me on Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
Lovely. All right. Well,
well, it is about. Well, I basically ask questions to fantastic people in the industry about many different topics. So it can be around UX, CX, or having a career in insights. So it's very, very varied, but it's just to uncover and to make a platform to share knowledge in an easier way in the industry.
Excellent. Well, I hope some listeners will go over and hear more about the industry from your podcast. And I thank you again both for being here, and see all of the listeners visually, sort of see with quote marks next time.
Yeah, thank you for having us, Nikki.
Thanks, Nikki.